pro et contra.
Well, what began as a response to the horrific attack of 7 October was transformed very quickly into an operation designed to either expel or kill the Arabs living in Gaza. I think we need to come to terms with that reality. That's the truth. And when Prime Minister Netanyahu talked to the Israeli population and described the people there as in Gaza as animals, that was widely embraced by the Israeli population. People frequently say, well, if Netanyahu goes, everything will change. And I keep trying to persuade people that they don't understand the level of support inside Israel for what is happening in Gaza. It's real. Whether you like it or not is another matter. It's just it's a fact. I don't particularly like it, and I think it's a mistake for the Israelis to do what they're doing, but that's where we are. I see no evidence that that mentality is going to change anytime soon. So where do we stand? Well, one of the things that's happened recently that we should have paid a lot of attention to but got very little coverage here in the West was Mr. Erdogan's visit to Egypt. Remember, it's been 13 years since Erdogan and the Egyptians have sat down to talk about anything. There was a lot of bad blood on the street because of the removal of Morsi, who was a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. Remember that Mr. Erdogan leads the Muslim Brotherhood in the region. By the way, he also leads it in North America. And he went to essentially bury the hatchet, as we say, with Egypt, with Sisi, and also at Sisi's invitation, because General Sisi's in a lot of trouble. He has to renegotiate his debt, which is considerable, and he needs our help and assistance with that. But he's also got a problem with his own population. So the discussions that went on, yes, they addressed the oil and gas resources offshore. They addressed the issues in Libya. But then they turned to Gaza and the security implications for Egypt. Egypt is a nation of 100 million. They're probably living on infrastructure designed for 40 million. None of the ruling elites in the Arab world anywhere want a war with anyone, least of all Israel. The problem is that the population in Egypt is very enraged about what is happening in Gaza. Now, they haven't marched into the streets in great numbers yet to demand the removal of General Sisi for his failure to act. But I think by the time Ramadan is over, we're going to see tremendous movement on the part of both Turkey and Egypt, as well as in Jordan and Syria and elsewhere among the Arabs and northern Iraq, to coalesce into some sort of arrangement directed at Israel and potentially against us. I'm talking about the United States, because we are seen as unconditionally supporting, which is true at the moment, whatever the Israelis want to do. And that's your first decisive step in the direction of a regional war. We haven't even talked about the very high probability of an Israeli invasion of southern Lebanon designed to push Hezbollah north of the Litani River and apparently to pulverize Lebanon in general into submission. I think that's coming, because having gone as far as Mr. Netanyahu has, he really can only escalate. If you do anything other than escalate, you're seen as backing down, as retreating. So he believes he has a strategic advantage. His strategic advantage is control of the United States and its armed forces. As long as he can guarantee that backstop, he's comfortable taking on other opponents in the region. Most important, right up front, Hezbollah. But once Hezbollah becomes engaged, it's not only Egypt and Jordan and the peninsular Arabs and the Turks who are discontented and unhappy with what's happened in Gaza and are increasingly willing to act in some way. Now you bring Iran into the equation. The Israelis have always wanted desperately for us to destroy, quote unquote, Iran for them. We have refused repeatedly. We have walked away from it. Donald Trump in 2019 was presented with a fait accompli. One of the reasons that global hawk was flown on the edge of the air defense identification zone was to invite the Iranians to shoot it down. And they did. And in a court of international law, they have every right to shoot down an unidentified reconnaissance, intelligence, surveillance aircraft on the edge of their air defense identification zone. Mr. Trump declined the opportunity to go to war, even though at the time, the United States Air Force and other forces inside the Pentagon had already put together plans for the strikes. And he asked the question, very important one, if I do this, what happens? Yes. This is the thing we never asked when we went into Iraq. We never asked it when we went to Vietnam. In other words, always said, well, wait a minute, you want me to go over there and do this? What do you want me to do? How do you want me to do it? And what do you want it to look like when it's over? He asked, what happens next? And it wasn't just 5 or 6 or 7 or 800 people might be killed. It was obvious, we don't know, but there's a very high probability we'll be at war. Today, we are infinitely less prepared to wage a regional war than we were in 2019. Our army is in ruins. If you turn to the British Army, it's down to 72,000 men. They can't recruit. The army is a shadow of its former self. You have a similar situation in France. It's a bit larger. All the armies, if you will, in Europe are boutique forces. They're really designed to fight people who really can't fight back very well. All of a sudden, people are talking about, well, let's think about using them against Russia. Well, that went away very quickly if you paid attention to what happened over the last few days. The NATO members all rose up as one and said, thank you, President Macron. Go back to where you belong. Stop talking this nonsense. We're not going there. Well, now we have a similar situation in the Middle East, only it involves Israel and the United States. Perhaps the United Kingdom has interest in joining this. I don't know. But the point is that we are not going to engage with anything other than air and naval power. And the history of warfare suggests that if you use only air and naval power, things will look pretty much like they did before you started when you're finished. And then the real question is, if you begin to take losses, and I think we will, because if you look at what's happening right now in Iran, northern Iraq, parts of Syria, northern Lebanon, there is a major air and missile defense network emerging with new technologies and equipment coming in from Russia. Those air-to-air and missile defense weapon systems are effective. They will shoot down American military aircraft. Now, how many? I don't know. But it's been a long time since anybody shot us down. And if you go back to World War II, which I like to remind people of periodically when they ask questions, we and the Royal Air Force together lost 18,000 bombers trying to penetrate German air defenses. Today, people can't even begin to wrap their heads around it. If you go into a regional war with Iran and potentially the other states that I mentioned, I would not exclude Turkey by any means, you're going to lose considerable forces. How much have you got to lose before you're out of business? Do we have the scientific industrial base for mass production of aircraft and missiles and ships and everything else? And the answer is, I don't think we do. So we're really not prepared for this. And it looks as though this is a plausible outcome if things escalate and the Israeli Defense Force moves into southern Lebanon. Then they have 3 fronts: southern Lebanon, the West Bank of Palestine, and Gaza. Nothing is settled. Everything is still open. And just because nothing has happened yet does not mean that things won't happen in the future. And that's a huge mistake people make. Things take time to develop. Somebody said to me the other day, don't you think we're in a World War I scenario? I said, no, I don't think so. And he said, why not? I said, you had existing alliances, existing arrangements. And as Princip, the man that shot the Archduke, said, even if I hadn't done what I did, there would have been a war at some point. He was right. They were essentially loaded. The triggers were half cocked. They were ready to fire. That's not true right now in the Middle East. People were not planning on an existential war for survival against Israel.